Well, hi, I'm Dr. Cassie Williams. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. My husband and I moved here to pursue my career as an assistant professor at Louisiana State University at Shreveport. I am an assistant professor of special education, so I teach pre-service teachers how to be special ed teachers, and I love it. My students are amazing. I promise you, LSUS is about to graduate some outstanding teachers, and hopefully we can continue to build on our program that is already great and recruit more students into our program so we can graduate even more outstanding teachers. But my goal in pursuing this BESE position is that I am in a position to help ensure that the future careers that my students are stepping into is something that they want and something that they can be proud of. And in order to do that, I need to be in this seat. I need to be in this seat and I need to represent what their needs are.
So question one. So in your own terms, how would you define the role of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education? What are the responsibilities of a member?
I believe that the BESE board is a board that oversees the funding and the allocation of funding and resources to our schools and districts within the state of Louisiana. They oversee the Louisiana Department of Education and their priorities and their goals for going into each school year. They oversee the relationships between BESE and the legislation and developing policy that will affect and impact our public schools. As a member, I believe it would be my duty to be an active participant in committees. The committees, specifically for me, I would be appreciative to be on a technology-based committee that is looking to improve the access that our students have to technology and to resources around technology and devices, especially right now when we're leaning so much on virtual learning, especially in our rural schools, who are getting left behind essentially because they don't have the resources that more urban schools have and suburban schools have. I believe that as a committee member, it's very important to reach your constituency base. And in reaching your constituency base, you're making sure that you are voting in a way that reflects their stances on education, on things that impact education, that impact their students, their kids, their families, because I believe that schools should be a hub. The public schools should be a hub. It should be the community hub where families can go to for resources, not just their child's educational resources, but community resources as well. And my job as a board member would be to make sure that our public schools can function as such.
What three priorities will you have as a BESE member, and how will you work collaboratively with other board members to integrate these priorities into the work of the board?
So my first priority is ensuring that all students in the state of Louisiana are provided an equitable education. And that means that we have to ensure that we're allocating funding and resources to schools that are in need, especially to our public schools that are in need. And I believe that my secondary priority is making sure that we are doing something with our universities, our state universities, to meet the special education and general education teacher shortage. We need to have a standard across the board for alternative pathways for paraprofessionals and teachers assistants and individuals with degrees that are not currently teaching or in the field of teaching but are interested in it. We need to have alternative pathways for those individuals to become certified teachers, but not only certified teachers, but highly qualified certified teachers, because that's how we ensure that we're meeting the needs of our most vulnerable populations, especially those teachers who are teaching students with disabilities. We can't leave those students behind, especially during a pandemic when we are not able to ensure that our students on IEPs are having their IEP minutes met through virtual learning. Another priority is being a teacher for the teachers. I feel as though our district hasn't had someone in a BESE position to represent teacher needs because we haven't had someone with a background in education. And that's where my background shines because I was a special education teacher. I am currently an assistant professor of pre-service teachers. So I'm teaching the next generation of future teachers. And I have this unique perspective from my position of what's going on in our classrooms today, what our students need today, what our teachers need today. And that's why that's such a high priority for me, that I'm representing those student and teacher needs, because if we don't do that, then our district will get left behind and not put on the top of our priority list as a state.
Question 3 is, which current Louisiana K-12 education programs or initiatives do you believe are working and producing results? And which programs or initiatives need to be updated or changed?
I believe that our early childhood education is emergent. So I guess we could call that working. It's emergent, and the focus is coming back to it to improve it even more. I believe that if we continue to funnel our focus on early childhood education and ensuring that we are offering universal access to pre-K, then we are setting up our students for success. When students don't have access to pre-K, they come into kindergarten and they come into first grade behind the curveball. And whenever they're behind the curve, it takes them longer to recoup those skills, especially when it comes to reading, recoup those skills that they missed out on because they may not have grown up in a literary rich environment at home. And we can't blame those parents. Those parents are just doing the best they can with what they have. So we have to ensure that we are providing all the educational opportunities for our youngins, our young folks as we can, because that's where we see those test scores, and we see that first grade, second grade, third grade are 50% or below or more are below the grade level in reading. And the way we improve that, the way we recruit those skills is by implementing a plan to better meet the needs of pre-K and early childhood education. Some things that we need to work on is the MFP. I believe that we need to actually run a study that actually does the math on what it costs to fund one student in a school year in the state of Louisiana. And because we need it, because it's not, the MFP isn't based on a study, it's essentially a guess at what it costs to fund a student. And we can't, this is too important to guess. That we need actual hard data and make data-based decisions. And whenever we make data-based decisions, we're setting the example for our schools that you guys need to be making data-based decisions as well, especially when it comes to what you're doing and what you're implementing for our students. By setting that example and basing our MFP off of a study and allocating or readjusting our formula to where it's more of a needs-based formula, and the money doesn't follow students whenever they go to, say, a charter school or a more privatized educational setting, and it stays within our neighborhood schools, it stays within our public schools, because those are the schools that need those resources. Students are leaving these schools because they don't have the resources to begin with. They're pursuing a better educational opportunity. But if that money were to stay with these public schools that are in our neighborhoods, then our students would be able to receive the same quality education that these students are leaving to go get at a charter school. They would still be able to receive that at our neighborhood schools. And I think that's really important, and that's something that needs to be focused on more by the board.
While each BESE member represents a specific district, many of the challenges facing education are statewide problems. How do you see balancing your responsibility to your specific district and to the state as a whole?
I believe the balancing act comes in making sure that, one, you know what your constituents want and believe and what their needs are, but you also have communicated well enough with your other board members that you know what their constituency wants and needs as well. And you develop the rapport with your fellow board members and the other people that are representing the other districts and the at-large members. And you develop that rapport and build the relationship so we can work as a team, because that's what the board is. It's a team. And we have to work as a team to ensure that we're not just meeting the needs of just our districts, but we're meeting the needs of every student in the state of Louisiana.
So the current COVID pandemic has required that significant changes to the way in which instruction has been delivered around the state. Are there any COVID-related changes that you believe are effective and should be continued, And are there other changes which you believe should not?
That's a really good question because COVID is it's so impactful. Who knew that in 2020 we would be hit with something that would shut down education as we know it and completely change the face of education, especially public education? I firmly believe that kids need to be in schools to learn, but I also believe that parents need to make that decision based on how they feel the safety of their child and the people in their home who may be immunocompromised, who may not be, are affected by their child going out into a public school and possibly coming into contact with individuals with COVID. I believe that giving the parents that option is something that we should stick to. Letting them choose for their child what they want to do is something we should stick to. However, I believe that the way we have approached virtual learning needs to change. There are too many kids failing. So many kids are just not doing the work. And I believe in order to change that, we have to find a way to incentivize school and to get these students motivated to do their work because they haven't been in school long enough. They haven't been in an educational setting long enough to have developed the self-determination skills that they need in order to get up every day, to sit at a computer, to do their work on their own. You know, that takes a lot of self-determination. I mean, whenever I was a freshman in college, I had a hard time with online classes. I couldn't imagine being a 16-year-old, you know? So I think that we need to change the way we're approaching virtual learning. Especially whenever we're talking about students with special needs, because those parents have a choice too. And if they believe that their student needs to stay at home, then they should be given that option. But we have to meet their needs of their IEP minutes as well. We can't just let that go to the wayside. And in efforts to meet those needs, we need to make sure that we have the adequate staffing to where we could possibly couple a student with an IEP with a paraprofessional every day for at least 2 hours so they can sit on Zoom and share screens and work on that students' work together to make sure that it's getting done. That right there is a quick solve. And that's a handful of students by itself that are no longer failing, that are getting their work done. And not only are they getting their work done, but they have the support necessary to do it and do it well.
The current COVID pandemic has highlighted both the impact that technology can have in student learning, as well as the access disparities that can inhibit student achievement. What role, if any, do you believe BESE has in helping to address statewide access to broadband for students and teachers?
I believe there are committees already working on this, but we are responsible for developing partnerships with broadband access. I don't want to call them corporations, but communities. And within those partnerships, we need to be getting the resources from those partnerships to be able to have accessible broadband for our students, especially in our rural communities, right? Because just as we said earlier, those students, they don't have the access that urban schools and suburban schools have, just because they weren't expecting COVID to happen. So they didn't have the one-to-one technology because they kind of didn't need it because they had the small class sizes where they were able to teach kids in a more individualized basis, you know, and they were able to spend more enclosed time with each individual student to make sure they were meeting their needs. But when they had to transfer to virtual learning, you know, that changed because our teachers did not go to college and were not prepared to be online educators. That's something that you learn how to do in your master's. That's something you learn how to do when you're getting your PhD. That's not taught to you in undergrad. So our teachers, every one of them across the board, were just expected to pick up out of nowhere these skills that were not taught to them. And I believe that having a lack of access to broadband, having a lack of access to internet is just a huge hurdle that interferes with teachers' ability to teach their students even more. Because, you know, we want all of our students on those Zoom meetings. We want all of those students engaged in those Zoom calls. But if they have spotty internet and it keeps kicking them out of the Zoom meeting, what can we do? You know, we can't really reprimand them for being in and out of the meeting. We can't deny them access to a quality education for being in and out of the meeting. So we have to find them the resources, and we have to develop the partnerships with these broadband access communities to where they have the resources for us to be able to provide for our students.
Question 7, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing Louisiana's K-12 system, and how do you believe BESE should address it?
I believe that the biggest challenge right now is early childhood education. I believe that we need to be offering pre-K3, which is whenever we offer universal access to pre-K education, where we make kindergarten full day and mandatory, where we vertically align curriculum. And what I'm saying when I say vertically aligned curriculum is I'm saying we take all of our teachers from pre-K all the way to 3rd grade, and they meet together and they align what they're going to be teaching and the sequence they're going to teach it in across all of those grade levels from pre-K to 3rd grade to ensure that our students have met these competencies related to reading, competencies related to math before they get moved on to the next grade. This would improve our test scores. It would improve our proficiency across the grade levels in reading and mathematics, and it would ensure that our students are not coming into kindergarten behind the curve, as we discussed earlier.
Okay, this will be your final question, and we'll include your final remarks. Is there anything you would like to address that we have not yet covered?
I believe that we haven't really talked about, or I haven't been able to talk about, what this reading, because I've talked about pre-K, but what this reading, the foundational skill of reading, how it really impacts our communities. So of all the kids who are of active military duty age right now, right, that could be drafted if we were to have a draft, at least around approximately 73% of those students would not qualify to be in the armed forces because they either can't pass the PT test or they can't read at a 6th grade level. That is 73% of age students who can't read at a 6th grade level. That is unacceptable. That's a whole generation of kids who don't read at a 6th grade level. And in order to combat that, in order to ensure that we don't have another generation that follows this generation of students who can't read at a 6th grade level, we have to meet them where those foundational reading skills are developed. Because in 3rd grade, we stop learning to read and start reading to learn. So that's why pre-K, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade are so very vital to the educational outcomes of our students. And reading, I mean, being illiterate in this country is considered a disability. And being illiterate in 2021 is even more of a disability because of how digital and how reading heavy everything that we do is. If it's not social media, it is the media that is online. And it's the way we interact with our communities. It's the way we interact with the stakeholders that are involved in our schools, that are in the parents. How we interact with mass communication with our parents is through social media. And like if we are expecting, our communities coming and growing past the years now, to be able to communicate back with us, to engage with our schools, because once again, our schools should be those community hubs where they can get resources. We have to ensure that we are rearing up the younger children with the ability to read, with the ability to do foundational math skills, because without those skills, we're doing a huge disservice to our students. And I believe that as public educators, we should always be putting our students in a position to be successful. And it is our duty as a BESE board to ensure that we are allocating funding and resources to our schools, whether that be urban, whether that be rural, or everything in between, with the resources that they need to meet every student's needs, to ensure that every student and their family are fed and they're provided a quality education. Because at the end of the day, you can't put a price on a quality education.